I try to sort of weed out in the beginning of the process with the client because I know that I'll be more successful if I can find someone that values those things like I do.
Welcome to Design Your Life in Business, the podcast for leaders by Bright Mind Consulting Group. We give you the necessary tools to help you become the architect of not just your business, but your life too. I'm your host, Jevon Wooden. Hey, Emily, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you today, Jevon?
I'm doing wonderful. Feeling good, feeling great. It's a pleasure having you here on the Design Your Life in Business podcast.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to see where this goes today. It should be a fun conversation.
Oh, I know it will. So we're going to get right into it as we always do with the first question. Who are you? Who is Emily Howard?
Such a loaded question. Let's see. I guess I'll start with my business part of it. I am the founder and president of Cheetah Strategy, which is a brand business consulting firm located in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And I do all kinds of strategic planning. I like to tell people that I'm an on-call strategist. So if you have some need for an extra brain power and you just want to bring someone in to think something through with you, I'm happy to do that. I lead strategic planning sessions for my clients. I do a lot of brand strategy and marketing strategy work also for my clients. So a variety of different types of clients, from government to nonprofit to for-profit to tribal organizations. All different companies use me for different things, which is great. I think the foundation of my thinking is the same, but all the businesses have unique problems. I help them navigate things so they can bring some ideas that they have to life.
Absolutely. I think that's really cool that you said tribal organizations. That's the first. So I love hearing that. So let's start from the beginning. Can you take us on the journey through your career? Like before you started owning your company, what did that look like?
Sure. So I grew up in the marketing and advertising world, started actually working in digital marketing when websites were still a new thing for people. I was lucky enough to work on the first ever Campbell's Soup website. So that was pretty exciting. So my career started in Dallas because I went to school at TCU and then moved to Dallas. So I worked for a company called IMC Squared, and we worked on Campbell's Soup for our clients. And that was the red and white cans that you're familiar with, also Swanson broth and Pepperidge Farm and those kind of things, and really got them all started in the digital world, which was amazing. And then I transitioned to DDB, also in Dallas, and had the pleasure of working with American Airlines and Pepsi on their brand and marketing strategies for many years. And then came back home to amazing Albuquerque in 2005 and continued to do marketing and brand strategy work here for agencies. And then after about 10 years, I went to work for clients on the client side of the business instead of the agency side. So I really kind of rounded out my career with both perspectives of what it's like to be on the agency side and the client side. And then in 2021, I started this business, Cheetah Strategy, and it's been awesome. I've loved every second of it. I learned so much from my previous lives, and it's really nice now to kind of have that perspective of both sides of the coin that I can help my clients navigate things a little differently.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. So why did you found Cheetah Strategy? Everything sounded like it was going well. What made you want to branch out?
It was going well. I have kids that are still in school. They're 11 and 13 right now. And I just wanted to spend a little more time with them selfishly. I had the opportunity to do that. And the further along in my career, I felt more confident to take that step. It was pretty scary to start my own business, but I knew more people. I had good relationships in the community. I had a very supportive husband. And it just felt right that it was time for me to kind of do my own thing. And I also love that I get to work with so many different companies and different people. The variety makes it much more interesting to me that I can solve different problems and work on different things all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Never a day. It's not Groundhog Day anymore, right?
No.
And you get a selection, right? You can hire and fire the clients as you see fit. So I mentioned the name Cheetah Strategy. How did you come up with that? Because it's both intriguing and evocative. So I want to know what the story is behind it.
Okay, so I'll give you both stories because there are two. So my daughters and I have a nickname for ourselves that's Team Cheetah. And this came up when they were little. They were probably 3 and 5 years old. And we came up with this name. I had read somewhere that if you create a name for your family, that it's sort of like a sports thing where it brings people together and you can kind of say, all right, Team Cheetah, like, let's get going or whatever you need to do. So we came up with Team Cheetah, and then I started reading more about cheetahs and just became fascinated with the animal. And the way that they hunt their prey is very similar to strategic planning. So most people think of cheetahs and they're like sprinting into action. But the truth of the matter is they are much more strategic in their hunting approach, where they'll typically go up to higher ground and kind of scout out the area and look around and then pick out the specific prey that they want to go after before they sprint. Because once they sprint, they're done. So if they don't catch what they're after, then they don't feed their family. So I feel like that analogy of kind of getting up to higher ground, planning your attack is very like some strategic planning. So chose that for my company name.
Yeah, that's pretty cool because it is really symbolic because it's kind of like it's parallels between the agile and calculated approach of the cheetah, right? In strategy. So that's pretty cool. That was well thought out. Sounds like you were making sure that you were hunting and making sure you're doing the right thing as you brand it. So that's pretty cool. So some of your approach is beautifully delineated, right? To 4 phases. Can you tell us about those 4 phases that you have identified as strategic planning?
The first and most important phase is really that discovery phase, where you're trying to learn as much as possible about the business and how they operate and what they have going on, what the competitive landscape looks like. And that discovery work skill comes from my previous life in agencies. That was what we spent a lot of time doing with our brands. And then I think the next phase is really that collaboration phase where you're working together with the client to kind of see what they have going on, understand more about their business. I do say to my clients all the time, like, I'm never going to know your business as well as you do. You're the expert. I'm just here to sort of facilitate the conversation and kind of think through things in a logical order. So that collaboration piece is big. And then kind of getting into the development of what the plan and the strategies are going to look like and what the goals are and how we're going to reach those goals and by when and who's going to be responsible for it. And then the last phase is really the action plan. And I feel like the action plan is where a lot of times strategic plans fall apart, that people don't always put together the step-by-step approach of how are we actually going to reach these goals that we're setting out to meet. So that's sort of the full circle of the strategic planning. And then kind of as soon as you're done with that action plan, you got to start over.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's the cyclical thing, right? And you're absolutely right. When it comes to the implementation, it's like cool story. It's like, oh, that was great. I'm glad we did all of that. And then when you follow up, like, did you do it? And they're like, nah, we'll put it off to the back burner. Something else came up, like, okay. So how do you ensure that they go ahead and implement what you have, or at least try to ensure that they implement what you brought up? And how is that instrumental for driving success for the clients?
I'm like to think of myself as a very simple and straightforward person. So I don't overcomplicate things. I think what I've learned in my life as a business person is that one of my really great skills is finding order in chaos. And if I can simplify it and make it attainable for the client, then it's so much easier to implement. Keep it simple, maybe 3 to 5 goals, maybe no more than 10 key initiatives to get to those goals. Because if you start piling on and piling on and piling on, that's where the overwhelmness comes in, right? The plan, like, I don't even know where to start. So just trying to keep things simple, keep it in terms that they understand, and also help them see that the big picture, right? How all of these things work together within the business and that they're not just one-off ideas, that they really are interrelated and will be successful if they're all done together.
Awesome. And I'm going to have you walk us through a little bit deeper because I love your 4-point strategy plan. So I'm going to start with the first point. I want people to see how much you thought about this branding, right? On the cheetah. So you say finding the proper vantage point, right? So how do you facilitate those discussions to ensure that you're really truly capturing their goals and what matters?
Yeah, I'm asking a lot of questions. I typically start off my projects with some kind of survey. Usually it's an online survey because that's just easiest. And I ask anybody that will have an impact on that strategic plan to fill out that survey, from upper management down to frontline employees, if that's who's going to be involved in the work. And so just asking questions about, like, what do you think you're good at? What do you think you're not so good at? What do you see out there that other people that are doing that you really respect? Just trying to get, not just asking what's your mission, what's your vision, because you don't really get the answers. You kind of have to ask questions in a roundabout way. What are you passionate about? What do you value? Just asking questions in more of a conversational way, I guess is the best way to put it. The survey helps me tremendously because if I can get all those questions kind of answered before we go into any strategic planning sessions together, then my question that stage will be different and more geared to what I heard or what I learned in the survey.
Oh, I was just gonna say, do you find that when you ask like the lower level employees, do you feel like they are kind of hesitant to answer truthfully, or what are you seeing there?
Sometimes I typically don't share the results of the survey with anybody at that company. Like those are for me most often. Some clients want to see them. So we'll say, like, this is confidential. You can say whatever you want. I don't ask for your name. I don't ask for your email. I don't ask for any of that stuff. I really want people to be honest. And I think keeping the answers confidential helps with that. Sometimes you can figure out. I also don't report back verbatim answers, or I try to keep it the aggregated results and kind of the key findings that came out of the survey. So typically, I think I do get good responses from people and honest responses. And there's no way to get better if you're not going to hear the truth. Like it helps really know what's going on.
Absolutely. I always say you need like some type of feedback loop so you not deaf, whether that's from, you need it from both sides, the internal and the external perspective. So, well, that brings me to a good question now that I said that, right? So how do you balance the internal perspectives with an external view? So to make sure you're getting a holistic understanding.
So I'm going to go back to analogies because that's sort of how my brain works. But if you think about a corn maze, and if you're in a corn maze, you cannot figure out how to get out of there, right? Like you are bumping into walls and you're asking your friends for help. And it's like this crazy situation where you're feeling almost panicked because you can't get out of there. But then suddenly, if you were able to see that maze from the top down, it's very obvious how to get out of that corn maze, right? Because you can see the path there. So that's what I tell my clients. Like, I'm going to help you get through this maze from the outside. I don't have any preconceptions of what you should be. I don't have favorites in the office. I really have no skin in the game, and I can be as honest and straightforward as necessary in a kind way, of course, but it just helps to have somebody else helping you through that maze because running a business day to day is so difficult, and able to think strategically and what's coming next is really, really hard. So I just hopefully kind of provide that top level view of the whole picture and see where different people are in the organization and can identify things that they maybe just haven't seen because it's hard to pay attention to everything.
Yeah, that, and then you get biased. No matter where you are in the organization, you get biased. Like if you as a consultant say, oh, what if we did this? Some people are like, that's my baby. I'm not changing it. Right. So you got to be able to let it go. Right.
Yeah, totally.
So,
And I am a therapist a lot of times. Like I hear it all, like, which is great. I love that. I love that people feel like they can be honest with me and tell me what's really going on and what's really frustrating them because it might be an easy fix or it might be a great idea that they have that has never been heard for whatever reason. So I love being people's therapist. It's really fun for me.
absolutely. You find out so much because that's something I talk about often with my clients is there is a human perspective. There's humans behind what's going on in that business. And when you find that you have so much insight and it gives you this intuition and inspiration, right? And that's really where the innovation comes from. There's a lot of eyes. I love that you go in there and you do those questions, not just the basic, how do you feel the leadership is 1 to 10, but you ask them like, hey, are you getting what you want out of this position? You know, do you feel like you have the resources? You know, all those questions that make it more personal for them. So I love that strategy. So second phase, right? Observing the situation carefully. I know this is like a critical juncture for the client, right? It's like, okay, you're conducting a deep analysis and kind of getting into that stuff they may not even want you to really find, even though they brought you in to help them. So what typically takes place on this section? What do you typically run into on that second phase?
Yeah. Well, this is kind of where my experience comes in of working with a variety of different types of companies because I've seen a lot of different situations, right? And everybody has similar problems, but maybe they're just kind of specific to that business. So it's really just kind of taking my collective experience and making some recommendations on like, here's something someone else has tried, or have you ever thought about it this way? Or just kind of floating ideas out there that either are past experiences I've had. I also tend to follow my intuition a lot. Mostly that works out well for me. So sometimes it's just like, I got a feeling that we should try this. And here's kind of what I'm seeing, and just running it by them and getting their input. And some of my clients are better at pushing back on me than others. And that really leads to really great conversation too. Like they'll tell me, I don't know if I agree with you, but what if we thought about it this way? And then we can have good discussion back and forth and make the observations a little more clear or a little more specific to their business. So the best clients for me are the ones that challenge me a little bit and push me to think about things differently too.
Absolutely. And that's a great point. And so I want to ask you, what are some things that designers could be thinking about when it comes to preparing for a strategy consultant or someone like yourself coming in and working with them to grow and scale their business?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is don't be afraid to overshare. Like if you have old plans that you have or business plans that you've written or work that you've done with other consultants or things you've tried to do internally, like just give them all the information you have and be honest about what the struggles are. Be honest about what the successes are. If you admire something a competitor's doing, share that information. Like just let it all out. And let your team participate too. You don't want this to be just for the higher level executives in the company. Like strategic planning does not work if it's only the senior level people. So let others participate and try to pick people that are representative of different parts of the company. I think that really helps too.
Yeah, for sure. Because you get that big picture, right? Because everyone at different levels are going to have a different experience. So that's a very good point to make sure you're getting insight from all levels.
Yeah, absolutely. And I recently wrote a column for Fast Company about this and how the biggest problem that I found with strategic plans not being executed goes back to internal communication and not having the internal conversations before the planning begins, as it's going along, and then ultimately when the plan is done. Like those are really important steps to consider in the process. And lots of times it's just simple conversations that could have been had that would have made the plan even better and would have made it easier to implement on the other side of it too.
Absolutely. Yeah. Communication is so key. Like so many issues will be solved by better communication. That question, if someone was honest about that, like, how was your communication? Instead of saying, yeah, we're pretty good. If they were honest and said, hey, we suck, that would eliminate a lot of the work we have to do as consultants. Let's just be honest.
Yeah, totally. And it's two-way communication. It has to be, right? You can't just communicate. You have to like listen too. So it has to be digested as well as shared. So that's tough sometimes, especially when you're busy to control the information that's out there.
Absolutely. So that brings us to our third phase. You're getting all this information, you're consuming it, you're tons of documents. When you get to the developing the plan and starting the approach, how do you ensure that the plans and the playbooks you create are not only strategic, but also practical and executable?
Yeah, it kind of goes back to the age-old concept of SMART goals, right? Like you have to develop a goal that's actually attainable. It could be stretched, but it should be realistic that you can reach that goal. Also, that it's based on a certain time frame. Like when is this going to be done? Who's going to be the owner of making sure this work does get done? Doesn't mean it has to be the person that does all the work, but there has to be sort of that captain that's heading up the ship to get that done. And then what are the action items that go underneath those goals, right? Like how are you actually going to achieve this goal? So it's just really about getting into the details of what the strategic plan looks like and making sure that those goals that you've set, whether it's in finance or HR or marketing or whatever department or area that it's in, ladder up to the overall goal for your company. So if your goal is revenue growth, then you should have specific things underneath that overarching objective that ladder up to revenue growth. If it's about global expansion, or then you make goals that meet that goal. So I think setting that clear overall objective or business challenge or whatever you want to call it is really helpful too. Because if things aren't lining up or laddering up to each other, that's what makes the chaos happen.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it goes back to that communication to make sure it's doing that, right? Make sure it's laddering up. So here we are again. So then once you do all of that, you make sure it's laddering up, it's executable. You have the final stage and skillfully that's that cheetah get in the middle. So can you tell us about what that looks like in that process?
Yeah, that's where the rubber meets the road, right? That's the execution of all this work. So I think the biggest part of this being successful is regular check-ins. And it depends on the timeline for the goal, right? But if it's something that's due in 6 months, you better be meeting like every other week or every month or so to check in on that. If it's 5 years down the road, then maybe it's quarterly or semi-annually. So I think those regular check-ins are really, really helpful in making sure that those goals get executed. So really, it's all about regular check-ins. The captain should kind of be the shepherd, if you will, and pulling the right people together and checking in to see where things are going and what progress has been made, maybe any new obstacles that come up, just to keep people on task with those projects. And that's why you can't have 47 key initiatives in your strategic plan, because that's just too much to manage. So I really try to keep those key initiatives down to maybe 10 at the most, because then it's just a little bit more manageable.
Absolutely. Can you give us, I think this will be really helpful for the designers to hear, but can you give us like a specific example of like a marketing challenge one of your clients is facing, how you applied the Cheetah strategy to help them out?
Yeah, I would say one of my clients has a little bit of a problem with misperception in the marketplace. People think of them one way just because that's sort of how they used to be. And so they've really struggled with letting people know we're a little different now, we're doing things a little differently. So what I've been talking with them a lot about is that you have to put some messages out in the marketplace that are really high level and sort of explain what you do at a higher level for the community. But then also weave in kind of those more what I would call retail messages, or ask for the purchase or ask for the buy. And sort of that combination, I think, of the brand level marketing and explaining the business overall, and then also the specific kind of product marketing to encourage the sales, if you will. So I think just helping them understand that both of those messages are very important. And I don't think we would have gotten there if we hadn't sort of explored the messaging that they had been putting out in the market and kind of had a good understanding of what people did think of them or how they were perceived in the market.
And that's great that you brought that up. So how do you identify how they're being perceived in the market?
Yeah, I mean, research, surveys, interviews, conversations with customers, those are the best ways. Even just kind of scouring your social media interactions or looking at the reviews that you have. Those are all great ways to collect information. The best comes from conversations with the customers that you have, especially, I think, either your really, really best customers or maybe those that didn't have a good experience with you, and kind of learning from both sides of the story so that you can hear where you're succeeding and maybe where you're falling down. So I'm a huge advocate for customer research.
Absolutely. Yeah, me too. That's something that a lot of organizations are missing on. And there's so many tools these days to help you out. And then, of course, the old school methods, like you said, really, really work. But yeah, so that's a good point. Now, of course, we're in the digital age. We hear AI, we hear all these different things that's coming about Web3. From your perspective, how has the digital transformation really affected the brand and marketing strategies of companies? And then if you think it's affected or not, how have you adapted to what's going on?
It's a great question. I'm working with a client right now actually on what does their future marketing department look like? And we've had these conversations that marketing is becoming more and more about creating new content all the time. So really trying to structure your team in a way that's about being able to produce content really fast, which has not been how marketing has, even 5 years ago, that's not what marketing was. So having that thought in mind that you need someone that can write and do graphic design and video and those kind of things really quickly is becoming vital to be successful today. There are still be those TV ads and the longer term things like websites, but content, whether that's social or email newsletters or even what's happening in your physical store, like everything has to be done so much faster these days.
Absolutely. And I think that's kind of where that repurposing comes in at. Like a lot of folks miss out on opportunities. They'll write an article and then I like to split mine up. That's what I'm talking about for the week. If I post an article, I'm going to split it up and then make those points for Instagram and all those stuff. So I think for people that really get overwhelmed with creating content, look at how you can repurpose what you already have in your vault and make sure you have a vault, right? Make sure you're storing what you create so you can just go there and pull. And if you bring someone on, they can look through the archives and see what can be utilized.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. And I think another thing to think about when you're coming up with the content ideas, think of it as you're answering a question from the customer. Like, what do you think your customers are asking you, or what are they asking you? And if you can answer those questions, then you've just become a resource to them or an information source or helping them live their life better. So thinking about how your customers, what they might want to know about you is a great way to come up with content ideas.
Absolutely. The fact content, frequently asked questions content, tried and true method. Yes, indeed. So we've been talking a lot about business, but what about the work side? How do you balance is a word. I'm trying to figure out what else I can use, but how do you do that? How do you make sure that you're living a healthy life and then still running that business that you want to create?
It's a daily battle. But I think one of the biggest changes that's happened for me over the last year or two is that I've incorporated more meditation into my life in the morning, especially like grounding myself in the morning for 15 minutes and just letting my mind chill out because otherwise my mind's crazy all the time. So that is super helpful to me. And I also make sure that I exercise every single day. I'm sort of a physical person. So getting all of that energy out in the morning is really great for me. And honestly, I just schedule time for my family. Like on my calendar is lunch with my daughters or pick them up from school and just making sure that my family, my husband and I even sometimes schedule coffee dates with each other in the middle of the day. So I buy my calendar, whether my family likes it or not, I don't care. And I just make sure that I make time for the people in my life. I've committed this year to spending more time with my parents and just fitting them in where I can, which having my own business makes that a lot easier than it used to be for sure. But grounding myself, getting my energy out in the morning makes me a better person throughout the day and really just making sure that I have time set aside for the other things that are important to me.
Absolutely. I love that you kept it real there, right? Instead of saying, oh, as a business owner, I only work this and that. No, you really have to plan these things, right? If you really want your business to succeed, you need to be using that calendar. And that's one of the first things I tell my clients. I'm like, I can kind of tell how you're living by your calendar, right? If you have nothing on there, but you're running like a chicken with a head cut off, that's telling me something, right? You're being very reactive versus proactive. And that's definitely not good for your stress levels.
Yeah. And a little bit of a sad story, but I think it's important for you and your listeners to hear. So a few years ago in 2018, unfortunately, there was a colleague of mine that died in a horrible plane accident in Albuquerque. And she was the exact same age as I was. She had two kids like I did. And when that happened, that was like life changing for a lot of people in our community. And at that time, I came up with this phrase in my head of always choose the talent show, which I had to choose one year to go to my kids' talent show or a meeting. And I chose the talent show, especially after her situation. In my mind, every day I think that like always choose the talent show. Like I am not going to remember that stupid meeting that I missed, but I am going to remember my daughter singing Fight Song when she was fourth grade in front of 200 people she didn't know because it was amazing. So that's sort of a mantra that I have in my life too, is just always choose the talent show.
Yeah, no, I love that because it reminds you not to take time for granted. We don't know when we're going to be called. We also don't know what's coming around the corner. So I think it's very apt to say that. Always choose the talent show because it's like those moments are what matter and it really fortifies your relationship. And really, that's what your child is going to remember too, right? The fact that you were there. It's not the gifts and stuff. They remember the time.
And they remember what you do, not what you tell them.
Right. Absolutely.
For most from watching what's going on in their life. As much as I want to tell them what to do, they're learning more by just watching what's going on.
Yeah, 100%. So I want to ask you this. We kind of touched on life, we kind of touched on business. So let's talk about how one's philosophies and values, right, really can impact their professional growth and overall satisfaction with what they're doing. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. When I was working on my website for my business a couple of years ago, the woman that was doing the work for me asked me a really great question. She's like, what values do you want to see in your clients? Like, what would make you have good relationship with your clients? And I hadn't really thought about that before. So I chose like 6 words to me that really mattered in making my work successful, making me enjoy the work that I do with my clients. And those were collaboration, honesty, reliability, positivity, tenacity, and timeliness. And I feel like if I can find clients with those 6 traits, that's what makes my heart happy. And I think it just makes for a mutually beneficial relationship. And if there's a client maybe that isn't so positive, like it's really hard for me to work for them, or if their timelines don't matter to them, that also makes it more stressful for me. So I think those kind of things I try to sort of weed out in the beginning of the process with the client, because I know that I'll be more successful if I can find someone that values those things like I do.
Absolutely. And I think we just became best friends. So let me ask you this. What are some resources that you would recommend the listeners to grab? It could be a book, it could be podcast, whatever you would say for them to achieve the life and business they don't need a vacation.
Oh man, I just finished a seminar on PQ coaching. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but the book is called Positive Intelligence by Shirzad Chamine. And that's a fascinating read and concept. It's all about that everybody has certain saboteurs that sort of mess with their mind and can take over things. And he sort of teaches you how to address the saboteurs in your life, but also how to find the sage in your life and look at things from a more positive perspective. So that book was great for me. That seminar was great. I did that with a group of 4 other women, and it was just really, really educational for me. I learned a lot about myself. So that's something that I would recommend. In terms of strategic planning and those kind of resources, I really love the articles and things that Harvard Business Review puts out. They have a ton of resources on strategic planning and how to think about strategy. So that would be something I would also recommend. So there's so many things out there.
Absolutely.
I try not to read a business book every day. Otherwise, my head will explode. And I try to just read some other things too. There's a lot of good stuff out there. Working Genius by Patrick Lencioni is also a great concept and tool that I incorporate into some of my work too.
Absolutely. No, thank you for sharing that. I got to check out that PQ coaching. I hadn't heard of that one. All right. So we're going to switch to our by design segment where I ask every guest the same 3 questions. You ready, Emily?
Oh gosh, let's go.
Oh man, you in for it now. Now it's just kidding. All right. So what has been the hardest part about designing a life and business you don't need a vacation?
I think just that time management piece, making sure I have a really hard time with letting people down. And I feel like if I say no, then I'm letting somebody down. So I think the hardest part for me is just learning to say no to things and deciding what's higher priority.
Yeah, I think that's most of us. That NO is powerful, but it's hard. Second thing is, what is the best lesson you've learned on your entrepreneurial journey?
Hire an accountant. Accounting is awful. I hate it. And I would not be anywhere in this entrepreneurial journey if I hadn't have someone help me at the beginning with getting the accounting stuff set up properly and just helping me with the day-to-day management of all that stuff. I am a strategist and a marketer, and I am not an accounting person.
Amen to that. I second that. So what are 3 tools or tips that you would recommend when scaling a business?
3 tools. I think creating some kind of peer network for yourself, whether that's if you're a consultant, other consultants, or if you're a working mom, other working moms, or whatever that peer network looks like, that's been tremendously helpful for me. And I really rely on other people to help keep me sane and run ideas by and just keep me focused. Another tool is, I think, just be honest with yourself that it's going to be hard work always. It's not just the beginning that's hard, but keeping that business going is hard too. So just acknowledging that there's work involved with having your own business and it's not only the fun things that you signed up for. And I think just keep learning. Keep reading, keep talking to people, keep listening to podcasts, just always be learning. Things move fast. Things change fast these days. So you got to keep at it.
They do. No, those were awesome. So thank you for sharing those. So this has been an amazing conversation. Very fun. Appreciate your energy that you brought and the insight. So how can everyone connect with you, Emily?
So you can find me on LinkedIn, either Emily Howard or Cheetah Strategy. You can also find me on Twitter at EK Howard. And then the website address for my business is cheetahstrategy.com. And there's a contact form there too. So pretty easy to find.
Nice and easy. All right, Emily. Well, we definitely appreciate you here at Design Your Life and Business. And on behalf of the team, we say thank you and look forward to seeing what you have coming up. See you soon.
Thanks, Jevon. Good to talk with you. Take care.
Design Your Life and Business, the podcast for leaders, is brought to you by Bright Mind Consulting Group. To find out more about Bright Mind Consulting Group and how you can become the best leader possible, visit brightmindconsultinggroup.com. Make sure you search for Design Your Life and Business on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found. Click subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at Bright Mind Consulting Group, we cannot thank you enough for listening.